Good morning. Absolutely shocking events that took place here yesterday, and of course GB News was on the ground almost immediately in the aftermath, and we were here all day speaking to members of the local community who've been absolutely rocked by the events. As you mentioned there, Yom Kippur yesterday, the most holy day in the Jewish calendar. It should have been a day for those of the Jewish faith, both here in Crumpsall and around the UK, to attend their local synagogue for worship, and instead that attack that has just shocked both the Jewish community and people around the world. Now, GMP, Greater Manchester Police, this morning has issued a further statement. Of course, last night they published the identity of yesterday's attacker, 35-year-old Jihad al-Shami, who is a British citizen of Syrian descent. But this morning they've published a further update saying that extra police officers have been deployed across Greater Manchester today in order to further reassure both the Jewish community but also people in Greater Manchester. You mentioned the protests that were taking place yesterday that perhaps could have caused more discomfort for those in this area. And City of Manchester District Commander Chief Superintendent David Meany said, "We have taken the action to ensure that our Jewish communities and wider communities within Greater Manchester feel safe and reassured following yesterday's tragic incident in Crumpsall. People in North Manchester, Bury, Salford, within Jewish communities and around synagogues can expect to see uniformed officers on patrol in vehicles and on foot throughout today, into this evening and over the weekend. They are there to reassure you, and whilst they may not be able to answer questions about the investigation, they will be happy to reassure you about the actions we are taking to ensure communities are safe and feel safe." Now, of course, safety being the crux of the issue there, Ellie and Cameron. Many people here and around the UK may be feeling unsafe after yesterday's horrendous attack at the synagogue, which is just a couple of hundred yards here behind me in Crumpsall. And of course, that investigation is still live. We know there are 3 people remaining under arrest, and we're still waiting to hear more details from GMP on that, so we'll be bringing you that throughout the day.
OK, Sophie, thank you very much for that.
Well, for the latest political reaction now, let's speak to the political commentator Theo Usherwood. Theo, who I want to say good morning. Of course, it's not a good morning, unfortunately. The Prime Minister has said that he will do everything within his power to guarantee the safety of the Jewish community here in Britain. How feasibly can he do that?
Well, we've already had a warning, haven't we, from the police that they've got to police a large protest in London on tomorrow, on Saturday, and that is inevitably going to take police resource away from the job of protecting the Jewish community that needs, both in London and in Manchester, and there are other parts of the country where there are also small pockets of the Jewish diaspora. And the problem we have now is that these, and this is a point that is made in the Telegraph quote both Benjamin Netanyahu and Israel's Foreign Affairs Minister, is that for too long the government has tolerated and the authorities have tolerated these hate marches, which week after week you have signs calling for the destruction of Israel. You have signs in support of a terrorist organisation, namely Hamas, on the streets of London, and the police do not step in and pull those protesters out and arrest them and put them in prison. And that's what should be happening, because what I really worry about, and I think all of us should worry about, is that unlike 20 years ago where we had the terrorist attack in London and there was widespread condemnation, everybody was united in the wake of what happened in London. Now we have this sort of equivocation within society where there's one quote in the Telegraph where somebody is at the demonstration last night where it said, "I don't give, an expletive about the Jewish community right now as they're protesting for pro-Palestine."
And they get away with that.
And they get away with it, but it's endemic, and the Prime Minister for too long and I've got a lot of respect for Sir Mark Rowley, the Commissioner of the Metropolitan Police, have allowed these protests to take place, and they need to stop. And the message needs to come down from the very top of government and from authorities. It is not acceptable. And because we've now had 2 years, pretty much, we're coming up to the anniversary of October the 7th, of these protests every Saturday, we find ourselves in this invidious situation where we cannot turn around and stop these marches from taking place. And it is there that the extremism becomes bedded in. And it's that then leads, and this is why the Jewish community isn't surprised. I'm not surprised, because I've worked closely with them over the years, that this has happened. It is inevitable. It has happened previously, and it will happen again.
The Shadow Justice Secretary, Robert Jenrick, has written for The Telegraph saying that the justice system has been way too lenient on these protesters. Individuals displaying images glorifying Hamas have been given conditional discharges. So politically, what can the government do, or in your view perhaps should be doing, to make the justice system more strict for these individuals?
Same what they did after the riots in following the Southport killing.
But then it's two tiers justice.
No, they should be doing the same. But you have the riots, you have people inciting violence, they go to prison for 31 months, the same as Lucy Connolly. That's what should be happening. People should be going to prison for stretches of time. It is not OK, and it leads to this, and we find ourselves in a situation as a society where we cannot just right across the board. You've got your views on GB News. We're having a sensible conversation, but this is not. We're just one view in this. This should be right across the board. We should be able to condemn this stuff, and it's not happening because you can go to these protests and there's going to be this excuse making for what's happened.
What did you make of the scenes last night, the pro-Palestine marches that were taking place in Whitehall, a large one, with clashes with police outside of Downing Street? There was also marches in Leeds, also in Manchester. Yeah. Should they have been allowed to have gone ahead last night?
No, they shouldn't have been allowed to go ahead, and they shouldn't be allowed to go ahead this weekend. They shouldn't be allowed to go ahead the weekend after. If you want to say, OK, we'll defend free speech, maybe you can have one march a year, but if you display anything in support of a terrorist organisation like Hamas, you're going to be arrested and you're going to be sent to prison for a long stretch. And that's the problem is, we can pretend that somehow that this is something that's been brought upon us, but actually, Keir Starmer has a political choice here. And the choices that he has made has always been because of the political arithmetic that he is under pressure Labour is under pressure in constituencies, whether they be Wes Streeting's constituency or Angela Rayner's constituency. You saw 4 pro-Palestine candidates standing on pro-Palestine tickets at the last election. And rather than taking a really tough line on this in the national interest, the Labour government has equivocated, and they shouldn't be able to do it any longer. But my fear is, and I think just one thing I would say to your viewers, is that this was a synagogue, and my heart breaks for the Jewish community in this country, as I'm sure all of your viewers do. But this is an ideology that doesn't just target Jews. This targets everything that we stand for in this country. This is a pernicious ideology that wants to undermine and attack everything in everything that this country, that the United States of America, that quote unquote the West stands for. And my fear is that, yes, you talked about copycat attacks, Ellie, and maybe it's too soon. Let the security services do their job, right? But my concern is that we end up in a situation very quickly where actually it's a synagogue yesterday, but we could see terrorist attacks and I know, Sir Ken McCallum and his staff at the MI5 and the Commissioner will be working very hard to prevent this happening, and they continue to work very hard in the shadows to prevent this happening. But we could see much more widespread attacks because this is not an ideology that just simply targets Jews.
Yes, and of course, front page of the Mail saying he was an Islamic terrorist. And what do you make, Theo, of the Israeli Foreign Minister's reaction, criticism, really, of the UK Labour government for failing to curb rampant anti-Semitism and anti-Israel rhetoric in this country?
Perfectly justified. And I also noticed what Benjamin Netanyahu wrote on X. He says, as I warned at the UN, weakness in the face of terrorism only brings more terrorism. Only strength and unity can defeat it.
Thea, we've just got some breaking news, which is that the 2 men who died in that horrific terror attack in Manchester yesterday have now been named. They've been named as Adrian Daulby, who's 53, and Melvin Cravitz, who is 66. They were both killed in the attack outside Heaton Park Congregation Synagogue on Thursday morning, 2 innocent members of Manchester's Jewish community. I mean, your heart breaks, doesn't it, for their families? Two men in their 50s and 60s.
Just on the holiest day in the Jewish calendar, going and worshipping, and that's what we stand up for in this country. That's what we should stand up for in this country. And if you want to put yourself against that, then my belief is that you should not have the freedom and liberties that we all enjoy.
I think in a time like this, it's also important to point out that the police were there incredibly quickly. From that first 999 call, the terrorist was shot dead 7 minutes later. And the bravery, I think, as well, of the community inside the synagogue, barricading the congregation inside to ensure that, the casualties were limited. Yeah,
and there was a security guard who, I'm not entirely sure, but I think he was either severely injured or killed. But, the police, there were videos circulating on social media, and, the police acted very, very swiftly to neutralise the threat, and the bravery of those police officers should not be underestimated, and the work. But it is common, and Ellie, you made the point when you're driving in of seeing police cars outside every synagogue as you drove through a part of London. It is worth noting that this is daily life for the Jewish community, that they have to employ security cars. There are fantastic organisations who are working to keep the Jewish community safe, and this is not something that they are at all surprised by. And it would have been so much worse were it not, I'd have thought, for the security and for the protocols of being able to barricade themselves in and keep themselves safe.
Yeah, I mean, I was speaking to Jewish friends last night who said, unfortunately, this was inevitable. We knew it was coming. She's been on a university campus recently. She's felt threatened. She's felt hatred. She felt as though an attack was coming, whether that be on a university campus, in a faith school, in a synagogue. It's so awful when you hear that experience.
Yeah.
And another thing to reflect this morning, I think, is because it was Yom Kippur, and especially for Orthodox Jews, they don't touch their phones, they don't go online, they don't use social media on that holy day. It's the holiest day in the Jewish calendar. They didn't know this attack had happened until they broke their fast last night, and they turned on their phones and heard this horrific news. I mean, you can't even imagine. And no group in this country, no religion, should feel in fear. They should not live in fear. That's not the way we do things in this country, and it's never been the way we do things in this country. And the government needs to get a grip on this really quickly. And Keir Starmer needs to make, and I think that Home Secretary needs to make some decisions as well, and you're going to be hearing from the Foreign Secretary fairly quickly about how they are going to take on this threat, because I don't think it's good enough for the Prime Minister just to say this morning, last night, I feel solidarity with the Jewish community. I know for many Jews in this country, that just sticks in the craw.
Certainly does. OK, Theo, for now, thank you very much. And just to recap, for those of you just joining us, the police have named the 2 victims in the Heaton Park synagogue attack. They've been named by police as Adrian Daulby, who was 53, and Melvin Cravitz, who was 66, both from Crumpsall, Greater Manchester. Yeah.